Malaysians love investing in gold, and it's been doing pretty well because this year it's been on a major bull run where its biggest ETF is up by nearly 8% in the first 3 months of 2024 alone. And that makes this video a bit more dangerous because in a few months' time I could look like a fool, because today I'll be talking about why I don't personally invest in gold. I'm not saying that it's a bad investment, but it's just not my cup of tea. Here's why. So the first reason that I've never really considered investing in gold is down to personal preference. Basically, I would just rather invest my money into an asset that is productive, which basically means businesses through the stock market. So in this sense, I'm kind of like Warren Buffett, you know. Of course, there are differences between us, but it's not that big, right? Warren Buffett is a legendary investor who's made hundreds of billions of dollars in his lifetime. I'm a YouTuber with a 100,000 ringgit portfolio. I've made a few hundred ringgit, some months when I'm lucky, a few thousand ringgit. So yeah, there are differences, but it's not so big. But what we want to focus on is the similarities between me and Warren Buffett. Basically, our similarity is that we'd rather invest in an asset that can give us returns, that can literally give us returns. And when I say literally give us returns, I don't mean that, returns on investment, because those things, it's completely based on perceived value, on what people think the value of an investment is. I'll talk more about that later on. But let's look at an example of investing in a stock like Apple. So we invest money into Apple, they take that money, they do some R&D, they launch the iPhone 20 or whatever it is, and then they sell it to customers, they make a profit, and then they return that money to us as investors. So that's what we mean when we say we want to invest in productive assets. Gold, just like any other commodity out there, it doesn't do this because, we just buy gold and then we hope that the value of it goes up. It doesn't really do anything for us while we're holding it. And this has always been my preference, especially when it comes to my long-term investing portfolio, because when we invest into assets that are not productive, we're basically hoping that in the future, people think that it's worth more than it is today. Whereas if we look at a company, for example, there's an actual value that's tied to it. So to explain this a bit further, let's go back to the Apple example earlier on. Let's say today that Apple as a company, for some reason, they want to sell their entire company for just 100 ringgit. But the thing is, no one wants to buy it. There's no investors in the world that wants to buy the entire Apple company for 100 ringgit. So even though everyone else thinks that Apple is worth zero, I would still buy Apple if it was being offered to me at 100 ringgit, because I know that they do make billions of dollars in profits every single year. There is a value attached to that, and for that reason, I would still invest in Apple and I would still make money. So yeah, that's the difference in the types of investments that you can make. I would just personally invest in things that actually create value. And I know that some of you guys now will talk about, hey, gold is not just purely speculative. There are use cases for it, like, jewelry in building electronics and some other use cases as well. And I know that that's true, but that brings me to my next point. So the second reason that I don't buy gold for my investments is that, to me, gold trades at a premium. So it doesn't trade just purely based on what people need it for to build products. Anyone who thinks that gold is trading at its current price because it's useful in the world, it's used to build products like jewelry and all that stuff, to me, anyone who thinks that, they're just lying to themselves. The fact is, gold trades at a premium because of its perceived value. So some people will buy gold because they want to actually build products. So yeah, that's fine. But a lot more people buy gold because they see it as a hedge against inflation, or they see it as a safe haven whenever there's economic uncertainty. So the price of gold doesn't fluctuate based on how much we need of it to build new products, or whether there's shortage of supplies, unlike any other commodity out there. So if you really wanted to invest into a commodity because you think it's useful to society and we need it to build new products, then you're much better off investing in something like cocoa or oil compared to gold. Let's look at the price of cocoa over the last 1 year. It's up over 200%. It's in the same league of Nvidia, Bitcoin, all those stuff, except it's a lot more hidden. But yeah, the price of cocoa has been going up a lot because there's a massive shortage of supply due to bad weather conditions or something like that. So yeah, we can see in this instance, because there is a shortage of supply in cocoa and people think that this shortage will last for a long time, chocolate companies like Hershey's, they will rush out to buy more and more cocoa. They want to secure their inventory just to make sure that they have enough of this raw material so they can build more products and make profits just like any other company would want to. So in this instance, you can see that cocoa, the value of it is directly tied to how much demand there is, which is basically demand not just to keep it and enjoy for ourselves, but demand for it to build new products, and also how much of supply is there in the market. So when there's high demand, low supply, the price of cocoa will go up. But gold doesn't trade like that. We'll never see, or we've probably never seen, I don't know, maybe I'm young enough, but I've never seen a company like Habib or Pokong, rushing out to buy gold futures because there's a shortage and you need more gold to build new bracelets and necklaces and stuff like that. It's just never happened in my life, and I don't think it's ever happened actually. So yeah, there is definitely a premium attached to the price of gold because of its perceived value. I think it's because it used to be our currency, or people used to trade in gold, and people still see it as an alternative currency in today's world, and that's fine. People do invest in different things to cover different areas of their portfolio, so that's completely fine to invest in gold if you think you want it as a diversifier for your portfolio. But that brings me to the next point, which is basically gold these days, it doesn't really work as an inflation hedge or as a safe haven in times of economic uncertainty anymore. And I'm going to show you guys some of the data in recent years. Let's start by looking back in the past. So in the US, in recent times, there were 3 periods of high inflation, which is basically perfect for gold, right? High inflation, we hope that the price of gold will go up as well, so that at least our net worth or our wealth will still stay the same. So in the 1970s, gold did its job. It did very well. It outperformed any other investment out there. So yeah, in that sense, it did do a good job. But once we go into the 1980s and 1990s, which were also high inflation environments in the US, gold actually way underperformed both real estate and other commodities. So we can see that gold as an inflation hedge, it does have mixed results. It doesn't always work. And to me, at least personally, if you really want to invest in a commodity to protect yourself against inflation, then something like oil is a much better option than gold, because we know that every time inflation is high, oil prices will be high as well. That's almost a certainty, because when there's a lot of money going on, that's what creates inflation. And when there's a lot of money, people are traveling, people are buying a lot more petrol, and yeah, the price of oil generally will go up. For example, let's look back at 2021 to 2022. That is the most recent period of high inflation. The US had extremely high inflation between that 1 year, and in that same time period, the price of crude oil doubled. So yes, that's good. We can see that crude oil, it does do kind of a good job in sort of protecting our wealth against inflation. But how about gold? How about the asset that its main purpose is to protect us against inflation? How did it do in this 1 year where we saw inflation reaching like 9% year over year? What did gold prices do? Nothing. It just traded in a range, it went up, it went down, but it didn't give investors any returns at all. Okay, so maybe we accept that gold is not the best inflation hedge, there are better options out there, but how about gold as a safe haven and a hedge against your stock investments whenever there's economic uncertainty and whenever the stock market doesn't do well? Does gold then play a good role in your portfolio to sort of offset the losses in your stock portfolios? Well, during the bear markets of both 2020 and 2022 in the S&P 500, obviously the stock market went down, that's why it's called the bear market, but gold prices dropped as well. Yes, gold prices didn't drop as much as stocks, but it still dropped anyway. So in this instance, if the price of your investment is going to drop anyway, then I might as well just invest in stocks. Or if I could tell the future, then I might as well just hold cash, because there's no point buying something as a safe haven and then the price of the safe haven going down, right? I can just hold cash, wait for the bottom of the bear market, and then buy more stocks. But of course, gold doesn't only go down in value. It has gone up a lot in value, especially when we look at the early 2000s, and even this year, like I said, gold has been doing well. But when we look back at the data, when does gold do well? Especially in recent years, we've seen that gold actually really only does well whenever the economy is very strong and people are bullish in the markets, just like right now. So in the intro of this video, I did say that the gold ETF this year, it's up by nearly 8%. So that's very impressive, because it's only been 3 months and gold is up 8%. That's pretty good, right? Gold investors are happy. But when we look at the S&P 500, it's up by more than 10% in the first 3 months of this year alone. So you can see that yes, gold did well, but stocks did better. So if gold only does well whenever the economy is good, then rather just invest in stocks, right? The returns are definitely going to be higher compared to investing in gold. And I'm not saying that gold is a bad investment, because I know there are periods of time where gold does really well and outperforms any other asset class out there. But that's the thing. It's a very specific scenario basically where gold is going to do very well, and we need to know when these scenarios are going to happen ahead of time to fully maximize our profits. So in that instance, especially when I'm looking at a long-term portfolio, when I'm trying to invest for multiple years or even decades, then there are just so many better investment options out there. And that brings me to the final reason on why I don't invest in gold. To me, right now, if I was looking for an investment to potentially become an inflation hedge or an alternative store of value, then I'd rather just invest in Bitcoin. So we saw that, in 2023, we know that the stock markets, the S&P 500, it was just recovering from a bear market. early in the year, it was still very volatile, it was going nowhere. But Bitcoin though, in January, starting the January of 2023, it already started its bull run. So we can see that now Bitcoin doesn't just follow the US stock markets, it kind of trades on its own, which is a good thing. Plus, the introduction of Bitcoin ETFs earlier this year, it just means that mass adoption is probably coming soon, and we'll start to see institutions, maybe even countries start to buy into Bitcoin. And before you gold lovers start hating on me for saying this part, I acknowledge and I know that Bitcoin has its own issues as well. It's not even my own favorite investment. I recently did a video on why I'm still not convinced by crypto, but to me, this is my view. So Bitcoin, it's also not a productive asset. It's still a very speculative asset, and the price of one Bitcoin is completely up to what people think it's worth. If today people think it's worth $100,000, then yes, that's the value. If tomorrow people think it's worth $10, then that's the value. There's no intrinsic value of Bitcoin. But as I said earlier in this video, that's exactly what I think about gold as well. It's just a perceived value. So if I'm trying to look for an investment that's potentially, a hedge against inflation, is potentially a safe haven, then I might as well try my luck with Bitcoin, because the only difference between these two asset classes to me is that Bitcoin, it will give you high returns if it does well. Having said all of this, I do acknowledge that I could be completely wrong about gold, and there's one major bullish factor that, gold could be seen as a safe haven. And that fact is that nearly all central banks, especially the most powerful countries in the world, they hold tons of gold in their reserves. And I don't mean that figuratively. These central banks, they literally hold thousands of tons of gold. So let's look at the US, which is obviously a major powerhouse. They hold over 8,000 tons. Germany holds 3,000 tons. And even now China, they hold more than 2,000 tons of gold in their central bank reserves. This is a lot of gold for them to be holding, which is basically like a support level, for gold investors, because that whatever it is, they can't tank the prices of gold just because these central banks hold so much. They can't afford to lose that in value. So yeah, at least you have that going for you. Gold, it can still be seen as a safe haven just because these central banks are holding so much. And when we look back in 2023, China's central bank is still buying a lot of gold. They were the world's largest gold buyers for their central banks last year. And this is probably due to the fact that they're trying to dethrone the US dollar as a world's foreign reserve currency. So yeah, they are buying a lot of gold. But even when we look at countries like Singapore and Philippines, which is our neighbors, their central banks are also buying a lot of gold, and they did buy a lot in 2023. So yeah, I guess for gold investors out there, at least you have this going for you. Whereas if you look at stocks, if you look at Bitcoin, central banks don't really keep these as store of values, right? But having weighed the pros and cons, I've been thinking about this for a long time, basically ever since I started investing, because I think about all the potential investments that I could make. Having weighed the pros and cons, I've decided that for me, right now in this stage of my life, this is just not the right type of investment for me. So I've even given this some thought. In the future, when I'm rich, then yes, maybe I will consider putting some money into gold. I think it makes sense, If you're someone with a lot of money, you have a lot of wealth already, whenever you buy gold, it's almost like buying insurance in case, global currencies like the US dollar or the Malaysian ringgit one day collapses. At least you have some gold with you. Maybe you go back to the gold standard, maybe you start trading in gold. Yeah, at least we have some. It's a good insurance to buy if you have a lot of money. But for someone like me who's like, in the earlier stages of my life, my investments, the focus of it is to grow my wealth. It's not to preserve it, because I don't really have much wealth to preserve in the first place. So the way I see it, gold is something that you would buy to protect your wealth when you're rich. It's not something that you will buy to become rich. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about gold down in the comments below. This video might be a bit controversial. I know a lot of people love investing in gold. I've been meaning to talk about this in a video for a very long time. I just didn't want to, but yeah, here it is today. A lot of you guys asked me what I think about gold as well, so yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments. Anyway, thanks for watching this video to the end, guys. Give us a huge thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. See you guys in the next one. Peace out.